Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. Sophie here, and I don't really know how I'm feeling, to be honest. It's been an interesting past few days, and if you're a new listener here, you know that this podcast is an open conversation where Daisy and I talk either about what's on our mind, but mostly it's about what's on our mind. And that means that we're going to fluctuate. Sometimes we're going to come here with the energy, we're going to be ready to go. And other times we're going to be in our feels because that's just what life is. It's this constant fluctuation between emotions arising and having clarity and having that sense of clarity until you recognize that, hey, wait, I don't know if I have clarity anymore. I'm starting to feel a little lost. I'm starting to feel a little disconnected. And I think that's kind of where I'm at today. And I just took a breath because I am ready to just chat, to work through what's on my mind, and in an effort to try to better understand, because I think that's really what we can do in life, is to just talk through things, express ourselves, and process. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be expressing myself, and I'm thankful to all the listeners who are joining us on this journey as well, for them to use this as an opportunity to check in, connect with themselves, and ask themselves, how are they doing?
Hey, it's Daisy, and I realize that I never introduce myself on here. So if you're new here, you're like, whose voice is who? Because Sophie is always introducing, hey, it's Sophie. But it's Daisy. And yeah, I like that sentiment. I think we have been running in circles. You've maybe seen the fluctuation in like the vibe or the tone of the episodes in the last week. And I think the reality is, the more that you just talk about stuff that's on your chest that you don't really understand of what it is, the more it gives you the capacity to have clarity to talk about those things in a way that might make more sense, right? Like when you start just trying to get words out to express a feeling, because feeling is hard. Emotions are hard to understand, and they're going to be involved in what we do every single day. So just being able to just get it out, talk about what it is you think's on your chest, and be totally honest about it, and stumble to some sort of maybe clarity or point of understanding, oh, right, that's what this is. And to be totally honest, I think for us, where we're at right now, I think, and I'll speak for myself, I think where I've been is understanding, what am I doing right now? I've been nannying for 6 months. We've been doing the podcast for over a year. And it feels like there's a place of growth that I want to happen, but I don't know what it is. And I don't even know if that's true of what I'm saying. I don't know anything that's true anymore. And it's interesting because I just don't know. And I guess it's okay to not know. What matters is that you're able to show up and feel and be open to what it is you're experiencing, because the answers always come from feeling. The answers will always come from feeling. And even Dr. Joe Dispenza says this from a scientific perspective. If we are telling our bodies something, if we are telling our bodies that I love myself, or I think I deserve a raise at work, but deep down, our body has stored, our subconscious has stored experiences that we're unaware of that have happened in the past, that believe that we don't love ourselves, that we hate ourselves, and to believe that you are not worthy of that promotion at work. You're not worthy because you are not worthy. And that's some real deep shit. And the reality is, if we are trying to tell ourselves and ask and work ourselves logically out of how we're feeling, like the brainstem is not going to allow that idea to move and to form into the body because our body doesn't agree with it. So hearing that, it really helped bring me back to understanding we can wake up, we can feel great, we can feel ready to go, we can feel inspired, but what are we doing if we're not feeling connected and grounded? Like, I've found myself getting stuck into this grind and rise and go, but I'm realizing those are not moments that include feeling. Those are like hard work moments that are born out of anxiety and all of these different things. But what I'm thinking about now is the importance of just letting go and enjoying the moment. And with that comes feeling the moment and whatever arises in this moment, and truly being able to feel what arises in this moment. And for the first time in a while, I don't know what I'm feeling. It's like I'm crossing a new bridge and I don't have an understanding. Deep breaths. I don't have an understanding of what it is that I'm feeling. And I think that's confusing. So I guess I'm just going to sit in that, in the unknown, and be okay with that, and not knowing what I'm feeling and expressing that, and not acting like I know what we're doing with this podcast, not acting like I have 100% refined business plan of where we're going, because that's not what got us here. So why would I suddenly switch into that mentality of trying to make things rigid when that's just not what this is about? So maybe I can help understand what I'm really feeling in this podcast episode. I hope I can.
Yeah, a deep breath is definitely needed. I feel like my body's felt heavy the past few days. And I think it's really been the past week. Like, I've just felt agitated and kind of, I think I've been fighting with myself mentally of not really understanding why emotions are coming up. And I don't even think I've had the understanding that emotions have been coming up, because I've just been feeling like, I don't know how to explain the feeling, kind of like my body feels really tense and like a lot of pressure in my body. And I know that's emotion, but I feel like I was having so much clarity the past week or past 2 weeks of like excitement and getting so excited. We're like hosting this event and doing all these things that I've been so excited about, that this emotion now coming up, it's like, I don't want you here. Like, I don't want to have to feel these feelings anymore, because I guess I have concluded, my mind decided to conclude that I'm healed and that everything's okay. And it's funny, I think whenever we conclude that we're healed or everything's okay, I think we're forgetting that emotions are the core component of life. We can't turn off our emotions. We can't get rid of them, but I think we do try to do that. And I have been trying, I think, to completely disconnect myself from my emotions the past few days, because quite frankly, I've forgotten how to feel. Like, I have forgotten how to feel, because for me, feeling either looks like I'm really in the depths of it, I'm crying, I don't know how to get out of the darkness, I'm feeling the pain, or I'm just kind of excited about life. Like, I don't know how to find that in between where I'm feeling emotions and I'm also recognizing like I am going through a lot of change now. Like, earlier today, I woke up just feeling really, I don't know, just off. And I've been waking up feeling off the past few days. So I just have been looking for signs as to what I'm feeling. I guess I don't know if that's my mind trying to figure it out or what, but I think what I'm realizing like I'm just trying to connect to myself, and I haven't known how to do that. So I was on Spotify and I found a playlist from, it was like your top songs in 2020. And I started listening to those songs and listening to songs that I used to listen to the past 3 years. And it was offering me this sense of connection. And these emotions were coming up of like me processing that I'm not who I am, who I once was. And it's, I think for a long time, aka the past month, I've kind of settled on this idea that I don't want to attach a story to what I'm experiencing. So I've been trying not to really understand what I'm feeling. I've kind of just been saying, like, let the emotion come up. But I think I've been thinking too much about it. Like, I've kind of been like resisting what's coming up because I've been saying, like, oh, you don't need to overthink it. But by doing that, I am overthinking it, because I think a key part of feeling is feeling the emotion when it's coming up. And even if that may not make sense, even if you could know that, hey, I'm logically okay right now. Like, I moved and I'm really liking this life I'm building, but that doesn't mean that all this emotion is not going to come up. So I think I am feeling confused a little bit about how much I've changed and how much I've grown, and not really recognizing myself and not really knowing who I am. And it's like, I find myself growing, and I find myself like looking at my old life like floating away, and me wanting to like go and grab it. And listening to music offered me this sense of connection where I did feel connected to myself. I was feeling remembering memories and remembering in 2018, or when I had just graduated law school and I was hanging out with those friends, or when I was in college, or just reflecting on memories to evoke that emotion. And I think it's because I don't know what I'm feeling right now. So I have to look to the past. I have to look to times where where I have had that clarity, and I have had that hindsight, and I have had the ability to reflect, to understand that is this feeling of growth. This is that feeling of change. I remember listening to these songs of just feeling like time is passing, or I'm evolving, or I'm changing. And I think what it's come down to is like there's a lot of emotions associated with change. And I guess I've been denying myself that because I've wanted to get going and be inspired and tap into this whole new life in Austin and meet all these new people. And I guess in a way I've been denying myself, so like, oh, it's only been 6 months, like since I've made a massive change. And I guess the reality of it is that no matter how aware you are, no matter how much you've grown, you can't stop yourself from feeling.
Well, when it comes to change, and I understand this because we've made a lot of similar changes, obviously. When you make change, obviously there's so much that's happening as you make the big life change, but there's also the remnants that come and find you once you've settled into this new life. And I think for us, like, we made a drastic change at a point in time where oftentimes it's common to settle down, move to a suburb, move to a place where you have kids, you start building your 401k, you start doing all of these things to build a stable life, to have kids, to do this stuff that we've been told to do, that it is comforting, it is beautiful. And I think moving from New York City, a lot of people weren't on that track yet because everything's delayed on the coastal cities of people are following their dreams and they're doing different career-based moves and stuff like that. But I think what's really starting to come to me is that we made this decision to leave our comfortable jobs, to leave the city that we knew, that we are really starting this new life. And in the beginning, it's like, great, like you're taking the plunge, like you're taking the challenge and you're running with it. And in the moment of the new beginning, it's exciting. But once it begins to settle in, it becomes your new reality. And what that means is your new reality is fully in uncertainty. And I find myself struggling with that. I nanny for a family where the parents aren't much older than me, not by any large strides. And I'm spending time with these beautiful children that I could be their mom. And I think having that experience, it makes me realize I'm not just a college student nannying. I'm a full-fledged adult. I have understanding of the world when being with children, the importance of when you're with kids and explaining and teaching things to them. And it makes me realize, like, I'm not a mom right now. Like, I'm not that. But in a parallel reality, I very well could be. In a parallel reality, my life could be focused around that right now. And I think that's maybe like a sensitive topic. Like, that's something where you start to realize things that you care about, but you look at the path that you've chosen and it is uncertainty. You realize there's a reason why I took this path, but I think I'm just starting to settle into the fact that, right, I'm 28 and I'm choosing a path of not planning for the future, but focusing on the present as a way to build the future. And I think that can be really uncomfortable at times because I don't know anything that's happening. I know nothing that's happening in the next week, the next month. I'm just taking it one day at a time. And I think maybe that's why I'm ready for the next thing, the next challenge. And maybe that's why I'm feeling like, okay, like what's next? What's next? And trying to force something where I do feel like there is an evolution that's coming with the podcast. But the reality is we can't force things. We just have to exist in this moment fully to work with it in order to bring those new changes. We can't blunt force bring things into our life. And I guess we can, but it's a lot more difficult than to just let go and trust that it'll happen. But it's really hard to trust that things are going to happen when you don't have a plan saying you're on track to make this happen. So I think I'm just really starting to see that we've made this decision. We're in this life plan. And it's ridiculous though also, because it's not to say we couldn't go and get a job if we wanted to change our path. I've learned more than I ever have from doing this podcast, making these changes about myself. And I think that's another thing. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not in my head. I feel, with a grain of salt, of course, but in comparison to how I used to live, my quality of life has done a full 180. When I look to 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was incapacitated by my thoughts. I think back to the first job I had, where I worked at a really cool advertising agency in New York. It was an amazing fit. I loved it. I loved doing it. Aside from working on big clients that I didn't agree with and doing just social media, there could have been a place for me there, but there wasn't, because I couldn't understand what it meant to take feedback without crumbling because my insecurities were so big. Like, I'm at a place now where I feel like I can finally engage with the world. I feel like I'm just waking up to realize I can do and function and do things and not be so swallowed by my thoughts controlling me. And it's an interesting thing to wake up when you're 28, to think, do people wake up like this right when they go into the work world? Like, I was thinking back, I couldn't receive any feedback without like going home and hysterically crying, not being able to handle it at my early jobs. And I think I'm just seeing that, right, I'm at a place now where my inner world, I'm ready for whatever. Like, I can handle things. So I think it's a confusing place of what's my next step? Like, I'm craving more challenge. I'm craving more challenge because for the first time in my life, I can handle it in a different way than I had in the past. So I don't know what that means for me, but that's just what I'm processing right now.
I think it's almost like when you're growing and evolving, you don't know where you fit in. Like, I feel like I don't know where I fit in life anymore. And that's why I've been looking back at
That's so true.
Yeah.
When you're growing, no matter where you're at, when you're growing and changing, you don't know where you fit at in life anymore. And I think that's a widely felt experience for anyone who's kind of having this like wake up of, wait, what is this life I have? And the uncomfortable thing that I do want to dive into and talk about is when you don't yet have the next place that you do fit in, just existing and not fitting in anywhere, it's wildly uncomfortable. It's wildly confusing.
Well, I've been having feelings of feeling like isolated kind of, and like missing maybe like, and going to the office, not because I want to go back to that job, but just I think growing your own thing and doing all this stuff and like doing all this deep, deep inner work is isolating because you're sacrificing really so much stuff. And it's not that, yes, like we're living on savings. So yes, there has been financial sacrifice, but it's not that like I don't have money to do stuff. It's more so this really uncomfortable feeling when part of you wants to change. And it's like, part of me wants to hold on to the past. Like, part of me wants to hold on to who I was and doesn't want to watch that chapter fall away. And I think the interesting thing I've been playing with that's been coming up in my mind is like, okay, so I feel like I don't know who I am. But I also, there are times throughout the journey where I feel like I've never felt more like myself. So I think this in-between place when we're not maybe really, really connected, it's just a matter of feeling disconnected. Like, I just feel disconnected to myself. And the reality of it is like, I think there's a lot of emotion there. Like, life is weird, and it's confusing. Like, it's confusing to comprehend that we're existing in space. Like, I had that full processing of that the other day when we were watching Our Planet, and I was like, holy shit, we're this species existing on the planet, floating in the middle of space, and we're all connected, and I can have these recognitions, I can have these understandings, but the pain still is there of, but who am I? And I feel isolated and I feel alone and I want connection, and my best friends don't live in the city I live in now anymore, and my family doesn't live here anymore, and it's just Daisy and I, and like we're meeting new people, but it's hard to take a life that I spent 8 years building, and I don't have, like you said, Daisy, like there's no comfort anymore. Like I even find comfort in like you nannying sometimes, because it's like that's a family. Like it really represents this sense, I think, of feeling alone, which I think is a really hard thing to grapple with. And I know that this is just the valley, you know, the peaks and the valleys. This is just the valleys of this experience, but that doesn't really make these emotions, that doesn't mean we have to devalidate them, because it's real that this is hard. And I think it's really important to acknowledge when something is hard, because when we deny ourselves that, when we say, you know, like just suck it up and move forward, and look, like we have had episodes where it is like, just make the change and do the thing, just do it. And I think this is why it's so important to recognize that we are always rotating between feeling and clarity. And we have to let ourselves go through that cycle of letting ourselves feel the emotions that they come up. And for me, if that is 1 week where I feel great and the next week I have to feel the feelings, okay. But did I really have to this past week? Why is it taking me 7 days to get to this point? Like, why have I been resisting talking through this? Like, I haven't even come to you and said, hey, I feel like we've been like denying ourselves talking about what's going on, because I haven't wanted to like cling to this idea that something's wrong, but I don't know. It's confusing.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I think one being, I think that the podcast is truly it is a place where we do put thoughts to our feelings in a way that we're just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. And usually something comes out, and we haven't been doing that. I feel like we've been coming into the podcast thinking it needs to be something, to be a topic or to be a comment on specific things. And
can I just respond to that? I also have found myself recently feeling like really insecure about what I posted on Instagram and judging myself. And I think I've been judging everything. And when we can look at like life from, if we're looking for a sign that we're disconnected from ourselves, for me personally, when I'm disconnected, it all starts first with I'm judging myself, I'm insecure, I'm judging the podcast, I'm judging where I'm at, like all this stuff. It's like a tornado of thought. And I think I'm realizing like beneath that has just been feeling that I haven't known how to access.
Well, feeling is so important. That's why this starts to feel difficult, like podcasting. Oh, are we out of topics? Have we hit the fucking wall with this? Are we done with it? Those only come up because we're not in touch with being open to feel, to work through, to talk through, because that is the premise of the podcast, is to just show up and talk. You can always talk. There's something always there. It's talking with a friend. It's talking with a significant other. It's talking with a parent. It's just talking with no expectation and no pressure. It's just community. It's just talking. It's figuring it out. It's not necessarily therapy where you're working on something. It's just talking about life, because everyday life has some sort of struggles that we don't have to make them super heavy all the time. Sometimes they're not super heavy. Sometimes they don't warrant therapy. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And that's okay to just be open to talk. And I've been missing that in this podcast, just being able to show up, not needing to have a rigid topic, but just to show up with where we're at. It's super helpful, a reminder. And I think like the community Zooms, we have some regular people who've been coming, and it's just really nice to be like, we don't need to put on a show. We don't need to facilitate or curate a specific environment. We're just here to hang out and we're here to talk, and that's enough, because that's what people want. You can go to things that are curated and facilitated, and that's also great, but sometimes you just want a space to just be seen in these thoughts that you're also having, these experiences that you're also having, because the reality is you don't always have that in your life. And I do want to go back to what I originally was going to say of why I feel like I brought up the advertising thing again, because I was a major in that. I did a lot in that. And I feel like I'm coming back to this. I feel like I left it because there was all this shame, all of this insecurity that had nothing to do with this world. I wanted to remove myself from the creative world because I realized within creativity, you have to let go of your thought and tap into flow. And I wasn't willing to do that at the time. I was so anxious. And I think now that I've allowed myself to let go, it keeps coming back to me. Like, we went to this local coffee shop in Austin called Spokesman, and it reminded me of what it was like to be in an advertising agency, like a creative agency, just seeing people like share thoughts, have ideas, collaborate. And I find myself really missing that a lot. Like in college, like staying up till like 12 a.m., 1 a.m., working on a project, brainstorming ideas, creating something. Like I miss that. And I love creating with Sophie, but I think I'm missing like having more people to collaborate and create with. And I think that's probably why I find myself arriving back at this advertising agency, because it is a really fun industry to work in. You do work with some really cool people. You do work with people who are creative and who are themselves and who are just expressing themselves to get paid. And it is a really special environment to be a part of. So I keep coming back to that. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I think that I'm seeing that I want to creatively express things for Life Unpotted and expand that and grow that. But it can be hard when there's just two people. So I don't know what that means for me. I think I'm just seeing the importance of like working and collaborating with other people too. And that's why we've had ideas of creating like a creative club where people who freelance, work on their own, different creatives come together and they work together, they brainstorm with each other, because I want that. Because you don't necessarily have to be working on the same thing. Maybe it's helpful to get opinions from other people and share, like you share your services with them or whatever that may be. And I'm really missing that. I really am. And I know that is something that's possible we can create, but I think it's listening to those things, and there doesn't have to be a rush, but it's starting to lay the groundwork and just accept that things are going to be uncomfortable, but to slowly work toward things. It's the slow progress that makes the big return, because it's consistency that matters. And sometimes being consistent means being able to be consistent with feeling meh about what you're doing, not feeling super connected, but continuing to move forward, I guess. And you're taking steps forward. You know you enjoy what you're doing, but there's days that you wake up and you don't feel good about it. You feel stressed about it just because you're listening to those thoughts, which aren't true, right? It's like, what does your body know? I think sometimes it's just confusing to know what's next, where are you going, but that's life. That is life. But that's also exciting. But it's okay to a week at a time, 5 weeks at a time, 6 months at a time to feel lost, because we can't force ourselves out of that. We can't force a change there. We have to sit with it. And a lot of the times it means that we're going to find answers, not necessarily through grinding and trying to force things to happen, but from accepting how we're feeling and working with that, and not trying to run away from that, but working with that and still quote unquote grinding, but keeping in touch with that feeling, because we can't ignore what our body's saying to us. Because if we do that, we are not going to go into a state of creation. We're going to be in a state of fight or flight. If our body's telling us it's stress, we have to work with our body. And that's really hard. Like this morning I woke up. I always know it's a red flag for me when I want to dive into the analytics. I'm thinking, I'm doing the math. I'm like 90 listens a day on average. Da, 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 da. And I am like, but why? Why do you want to check the analytics? Why are you looking at the analytics? And that's where I'm at right now. Why do you give a shit about the analytics outside of a baseline, just touch base understanding? Okay, cool. Why am I obsessing? Because I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for certainty. So it's okay to not understand where you're going, but to keep going and to be connected to it, because there's typically something on the other side of that. Even if it's just feeling inspired again, ready to create, because you're working with your body. There's like an equation there. Always, like there's no separation between the mind and the body. And our body has so many answers. It is the answers to the unconscious, and the unconscious is what drives us. And we have to work with our body. We have to feel, we have to allow ourselves to arrive how we are, because that's how we make change, is arriving based off how our body feels and working through that to change how our body feels.
So it's like right now my body feels heavy and tired and weighted, and I have a headache and I feel sad. So I guess that's okay. Like, to acknowledge that. I feel like I just don't know how to feel sad. I don't know if that's a complete 180 to what you're saying, but honestly, that's just what's on my mind. And it's just like this pressure comes over. Like, I feel like I've been pressuring myself so much of just everything has to be perfect. The podcast has to be perfect, that I feel like I haven't even let myself just talk on the podcast because.
Well, there's no right way to feel. There's no right way to feel. Just be. Just exist. It's okay.
But that's hard. It's easier said than done.
I know it is. That's why we're talking about it right now, because it is something that, well, you kind of are, like what we're doing right now. Like, you are saying that you feel this way, and that's okay. You can bring that with you.
Yeah.
Does that resonate? You can tell me if it doesn't.
Well, I definitely know that I need to like cry again, which is just sometimes I'm like, it's so annoying. Why do I have to cry often? And I think, I don't know. This is where the times come in of like, wow, life was so much easier when I was so disconnected from myself. Like, life was so much easier when I was so caught up in the idea of Sophie and I wasn't working on myself and I wasn't looking at all this shit. And it's like making the decision to change your life is painful and hard. And there's moments that come up where it's just like you kind of are in the depths of that. And I guess it's just where I am. And it's like, I brought myself here. Like, I did this to myself. I moved, I left, I did all this stuff. And I just think that like sometimes there's no easy way out. There isn't just that answer of like everything's okay, because maybe right now everything isn't.
Well, you're in a major period of growth and you can't see it. You're living away from home, the home state you were born in, just for 6 months. And pain is uncomfortable. Growing pains are real. We literally have growing pains as we're growing from a small child to a medium-sized child and to an adult. Like, there are legit pains. We get stretch marks on our skin from like quick growth because it's uncomfortable. And right now you're going through like expedited growth, like supercharged growth, because you put yourself in the discomfort.
And I guess it's hard when nothing reflects that back to me. Like, I feel
like community, like
community.
It's not like you like
in-person community. Like, we have friends here, but it's like I don't have best friends. Like, we do, but not like I don't. There's something about being with those people who just have known you your whole life, and I think the reality of it is like I'm trying to swim through the waters of discomfort, and I know how to swim, but it's easy sometimes to forget that you know how to swim because you feel weighed down. And I think it always comes back to just letting yourself to get to that place where you can acknowledge you feel weighed down. And I can acknowledge that it's hard.
I understand.
And I think I've struggled to get to that place where I can admit that to myself. I think I haven't been able to admit to myself that it's hard, that this is hard. And I don't know why. I think maybe I'm trying to be so like, you can do this, like, keep moving forward, like, be macho. I don't know what it is. Like, be resilient. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't want to admit to myself that this is hard. Maybe because if I admit that, I'm scared that means I regret my decision. Or if I admit that, that means maybe this is not what I want. Maybe I'm like, I've been so like, okay, we'll reassess release at the end of the year. Like, taking it moment by moment is painful because there's no comfort. And I just think that that's really hard to go through.
It most certainly is. And it's interesting to say that you have not been allowing yourself to feel that this is a difficult change, and it still is. And I think that's part of probably why you've been feeling sad, is because you haven't allowed yourself. Because remember, like, emotions, they happen pretty quick. And when we don't actually allow them to come to their completion, we continue to feel them.
I feel like this feeling has been trying to come to its completion for 2 weeks. and it's been lingering.
And you've resisted that.
And I keep resisting it.
So it keeps you stuck in its grasp of sadness. It's like, of course it's going to feel difficult to accept for some reason to you that you can feel sad and that this is hard 6 months into this change, which it is. 6 months into a move, like, oh yeah, that's difficult. 6 months into entirely changing your life. Like, these are big things. Like, and I know this as someone who my entire life, I would just run away from things. I would say, oh, my parents dropped me off at college. See you later. I'm moving 3,000 miles away. See you later. It's like you just are running and you're not allowing yourself to check in and say, well, how am I doing? Because when you do that, you're going to have to like really comprehend some real shit that might be underneath that of what have you been running from? And for me, that was my entire family dynamic. And I ran from that for years. I was petrified. And I look back and that's why I was running, because I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and really process my experiences. And I ran for nearly a decade from that. And the reason I say that is because obviously there's deeper things for you than just this move that are underneath that are hard to look at, that represent a huge transition in your life in a multitude of ways. And we don't let these emotions come to fruition, to completion, because it's not always that easy. We're not always ready. And it gets to a point where we become ready when we realize we can no longer live this way. We can no longer sit in this lukewarm environment. We're ready to live where the skies are bright blue, the birds are chirping, and we feel like a feather. We feel light. And it's once we decide, I'm not going to live this way anymore, that we allow those things to come to fruition. We allow those emotions to come to a completion. And it's not always that quick. It can be like pulling an onion of a layer back. And maybe you're just ready to pull back another onion layer, just one right now. Like maybe that's where you're at, to complete that initial emotion cycle of completion. So I can tell this is getting real.
Yeah.
But that's
the point, I guess.
That's the point. That's the truth, is that shit's hard.
Yeah. And it's just like, I feel like because I am aware now, I have felt a major shift in my body the past week of like, my body I feel so off. Like I have felt so off. And I think my baseline now, because I have made so much growth, is I normally feel connected to myself, and I have felt so disconnected to myself. And it becomes so apparent, maybe more apparent than it ever would have. And that causes even more suffering, because I'm just like, I don't want to be like, I feel so off. And I just think that's because I think like, even like when I would cry the other day, it was just like, okay, I don't know how to just be in this state for like 3 days or whatever time period I need to feel these emotions. I feel like I let myself feel them for 10 minutes and then I go back to the world. Like I don't know how to let myself feel them for 20, 30, 24 hours, 48 hours. And I don't know if that's the answer. I just think I'm resisting the shit out of all of this. And I don't know why that is. And I think it's a habitual habit, and I'm learning. I have spent my life running away from my emotions. I've spent my life running away from myself. And that's just to validate anyone out there, because it's hard. No one taught us how to feel. Like I was never taught how to feel. It's like the most beautiful thing of this experience, yet it's the most difficult thing to do. And like last night in the community Zoom, we were having a deep chat, and it was so validating to hear from other people. And it's like, then you go out to the street, and I go for a walk this morning, and I'm like scared to make eye contact with anyone because I'm just feeling. And it's like that community where you're seeing is so important to cultivate. And I just think that that's what we're trying to do with the in-person community we want to build here in Austin. And these community we're building online with the community Zooms and the workshop is just, we're not meant to go through life alone. Like we're meant to go through it with other people. We're meant to be seen. We're meant to express ourselves. And expression is so important. Expression is life. Expression is life. It's everything. And it's like, I think when we like deny ourselves the ability to feel, we like go through this period where we forget that like every single day we're waking up and we're living. It's not like, okay, you're back into the world, like you are, but we're alive. Like as long as we're breathing, as long as we're existing on this planet, we're gonna feel. And it's like, I am not prescribing to the mentality that I have to turn that off or I have to dismiss that. And I think so much of my life, so much of my work world, so much of everyone's experience has been put on the happy face, be okay. You can't show what's beneath that because no one really has known how to feel what's beneath that because we've all ran from what is really beneath that. And it's like our friend came over the other day who said her grandpa was in the Vietnam War and never processed it. Like we can go through death. We can watch our loved ones die and still not face it. And I think facing ourselves is the hardest thing we will ever do while being alive. But it is where freedom comes in and where we allow ourselves to feel light as a feather. And I think, if anything, this is just a reminder to me that the way I used to live was of avoidance. The way I used to live was running from myself. And sometimes I miss that because it gave me safety. And I think the reality of it is now I am choosing to live a life where I'm not running, but that's hard because I have no shelter. I have nothing to hide from. I am in it. I'm in the rapids of the currents. I'm in the waves. I'm going through it. I'm allowing myself to go through it. And I just think that that is really difficult. And it may sound more appealing to be in that life where I was where I was quote unquote comfortable, but I know I was not comfortable beneath that. I was in massive, massive pain and hurt.
Be where your feet are. Being where your feet are requires you to feel what it is that you're feeling and to bring that into the next moment. And we can be a million miles away from our feet being a million miles behind us. And we can keep going like that for a long time. I mean, we can for our entire lives, but we're going to wake up one day and realize I feel like ass. I feel like shit because I have been neglecting where my feet are a million miles behind me. And the reality of that is that it's going to take time for your feet that are a million miles behind you to catch up to where your head is. It's going to take a long time. That's why they say that phrase, is my understanding, is because our brains can go. We're intellectual beings, but the real intellect is our bodies. And if we don't have those two things connected, if there's a disconnect there, we might think that we're a million miles ahead, but we're actually a million miles behind because we're making ourselves go through difficult loops because we're disconnected. And it's so important to be where your body is because our body holds so many answers. Our body is full of answers. It's full of also memories. It's full of things. And it's a long process, but I think it's just so beautifully said when it's said to be where your feet are, because that might mean that you feel like you have to take some steps backwards to meet those feet again, to put your head over those feet, because healing, growing, it's not linear. It's sideways, it's up and down, it's diagonal. And it's, I had judgments recently of being like, looking at myself in the mirror, like holding the nanny kids that I have and being like, you look old. Like, these aren't your kids. Like, who are you? I started judging myself, thinking I'm this certain way. But that was all through the lens of like judgment. That was all through the lens of judgment. That wasn't through the lens of compassion. That wasn't the lens through I'm meeting my mind where my body is, where my feet are. I'm learning to live this life in tandem with my head and my feet connected and being in the present moment. And that is not something that anyone can necessarily see. It's just something that you can experience. So, of course, those judgments are going to come in. But I think it's understanding, what are you cultivating? What are you really growing on the inside? Are you growing? Are you loving? Are you learning to love and to be at peace and to work through things? And I think that is invaluable, and that can look a million different ways. And there's not a number that we can put on that. There's not a price we can put on that.
I feel like I haven't had an inner world for the past few weeks. Like I've been like going in and out of it, and drawing a contrast to days where I've woken up and I'm stretching, I'm feeling, I'm giving myself self-love, I'm giving myself compassion, I'm journaling, I'm like rooting for myself. I feel like I went to the other side of being like, get your shit together, don't post that on social media, people are gonna judge you, you don't know what you're doing in your life, the podcast sucks. I'm like, oh, we should just stop the podcast. I've had thoughts. I'm like, it's not even good anymore. Just like self-sabotage at its finest. And I think the goal is to live in the state where you are connected to yourself all the time. And I guess this just shows how difficult this journey is, even when I am more aware of my thoughts, I'm not reacting, I still am falling back into kind of this disassociated state of not feeling. And that was my base state for my entire life. So, of course, 30 years of unlearning. Oh, and I see people now like Hector Marcel. I feel like every time I see him on social media or ever see him, like we interact with him, he's feeling. Like there are people I interact with. I feel like I feel them at all times. And I guess I'm just seeing how easy it is to become that ghost. You like become a ghost of your own body. You become a ghost of your own heart, and you forget who you are, and you forget that you have this heart in your body that you have to nurture, and that the reality of it is no one else can do that for you. Community is so important, but ultimately we only have ourselves. And I think that when we lose sight of how to come back to ourselves, I understand why people have practices like meditation, because we need practices to keep us, as long as we're still growing and we're not used to living in a state where we are feeling, we need these practices to bring us back. We need to bring ourselves back to the center of feeling. It's like when you do like the chakra yogas, like your energy is all discombobulated because, like you're saying, I really like, you can be a million miles away from where you really are. You can be a million miles away. That would be a nice poem if you write that. Like,
I kind of started free versing.
Yeah. What would the lyrics say? What would the writing say?
I don't know. Don't put me in the spot like that.
Come on. But yeah, I think it's just
that was a nice deep breath. This is what it's about.
Yeah, it's like it's okay.
Well, it's just a good reminder that when you can feel, everything's okay. We don't have to run from anything. It's just nice to exist. And
that's the state of peace. That's the state of contentment. And it just, when you're running, you're not here. Like, I don't want to spend my life running. And even if I'm passionate about things, even if I'm excited about things, I'm not losing myself to success. I'm not losing myself to any of that. And it's pretty damn hard to walk that line. It's a very thin line, but I'm remembering now the importance of self-love. And I guess I have just forgotten what that meant.
Life becomes life becomes very empty when you go numb. And you go numb when you aren't openly feeling. And that doesn't necessarily mean like crying. That can be the case sometimes. But it can just allowing yourself to take a breath, and just like a breath like that, and just to
hand on the heart.
Yeah. I mean, I've had my hand on the heart for a lot of this conversation, because it's just getting in touch with yourself. And sometimes just talking can really help you do that. And this episode has helped me do that. I feel so much more connected to myself. And like, I haven't been wanting to write any poetry because I'm like, I don't want to just force things that I'm not feeling, but it's not about that. It's about finding practices that allow you to have no pressure to just be. And I'm glad that I have found my way back to this feeling. And this is why I'm forever grateful to this podcast, because we've found it again. I think the last 2 weeks we've been like confused and lost, very lost, trying to force things to be something.
So lost that I was like, I'm done healing. That's funny.
Right, that we like thought we had to shift the way things were, when in reality, like, this podcast is just a place to exist, a place to process. And it's as simple as it can be, because that is as simple as it is to human beings, that we need that. And it's so common that we don't have that. It's simple.
And like if the listener to them, they put this podcast on and they go on a walk and that is their meditation, like,
or they're not even listening, but they know that they're not processing alone and they're being
exactly
shown.
like they're feeling with us. And I
Right.
think that's what this is. Like, let this podcast be a chance for you to feel, and let it be that space to do so, because the reality of it is it's really hard to cultivate that in life. We can, but we need resources, we need tools, and this is just another tool for myself. And if it's a tool for myself, I know it's a tool for other people, because I've been doing a shit ton of work, but
There's no right way to,
still find myself here.
and there's no right way to do it.
No.
That's the thing. Take that pressure and release it. So this has been a good episode. We just hit the hour marker. And yeah, no, but seriously, I appreciate listeners here, because I feel like we're probably going through similar things. On paper, they might not look similarly at all, but feeling is feeling. It's an experience that opens you up to a whole new reality and a whole new world of just existing and enjoying. And it's hard. It's difficult. That's why we do this twice a week. It's why we have the need or the desire or the want to talk about this as often as we do. And it's why we want to expand it to be in person. And I'm seeing now there's no pressure with that. Like, we're just going to bring this, we're just going to show up, and we're just going to put something on, and we're going to feel, you know what I mean? Like, that's all this ever is. So I'm feeling extra grateful for our listeners today, just because I'm feeling connected to myself. I'm feeling like I can actually feel, and I am grateful for that. It's just the reminder to me of why I keep going down this uncertain journey, is because I know that feeling is how I want to exist on my short life here, the short life we all have. I just don't want to lose sight of that. And I want to live it fully and deeply. And that's what we're doing here. We're not trying to be anything. We're just allowing yourself to feel, to exist. And we're welcoming you to join us in that. Put us on for 45 minutes to an hour. I hope that this helped you process whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that you're experiencing. And we look forward to next week's episode. Or this is a Thursday episode. So have a great weekend. And thanks for being here. And we are here for you.
And know that you're not alone. Like, I know how isolating it can be when just life, man. Whether you're working remote, whether you're just, even if you're going to the office, just kind of existing in this empty blob where you feel like no one understands you. And just know that you're seen and you're validated, and whatever it is that you're going through is real. Emotions are real. Even if we realize after that all we needed to do was talk, they're real, and let them be there. And take the time that you need to connect with yourself, whether that's deep breathing or meditating or journaling. Like, these are the practices that do ground us. And if we're not grounded here, where are we? And maybe that's a great place to leave the listener a question to ponder. If you're not here, where are you? Where are you right now as you're listening to this? And how can you come back to where your feet are? How can you come back to where your body is? How can you come back to yourself? So thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us a platform to feel, because this podcast means so much to me, and it is, without it, I don't know where I'd be. So thank you to the listeners. Thank you to my co-host, Daisy. And thank you to the universe for giving us this planet and the carbon and oxygen that we can inhale and exhale and talk, and to Steve Jobs for giving us these phones, and just for the collective mind for continuously working together and evolving and innovating and growing and never giving up. And no matter what our doubts tell us, I know we'll be on these mics twice a week. Even if 2 hours ago I was like, we should probably stop doing that Thursday episode because there's no point to it. Don't listen to your thoughts, folks. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.